Yeah. Am I audible, guys? All right. Let's start. So we were discussing about componentization. So let's discuss about that. I was mentioning about a car and multiple assets with different useful lives. Different useful lives. So when there are different assets, there are different components which have got different useful lives, and these components can be used independently. Can be used independently. In such cases, any such assets are supposed to be any of those such assets are supposed to be identified in our books of accounts independently, and depreciation is to be charged for each of those separately. Separate depreciation is supposed to be charged. Now, how do we do this? Say out of the entire car, the engine is identified to cost. If at all I would like to try this, buy this engine alone, the total car cost happens to be 10 lakhs, and this engine alone is sold for 4 lakhs, say. In such case, I would initially recognize for 4 lakhs, and this 4 lakhs is written off over 20 years. And say the outer chamber, whatever is there, this is gonna be available for say 2 lakhs, and this would be written off over 10 years. The inner chamber would be available for 10 lakhs, 4 lakhs, and this would be independently charged off for 5 years. So this is how I independently identify and then depreciate it over the individual useful lives. Now please mind, such componentization is allowed only when if such assets, if the components of the asset are independently usable. That is, they can be used with any other asset, not just this asset but any other asset. Only then it can be componentized and used. If they cannot be used independently, componentization cannot be done. Okay, so this is first important aspect we need to learn when we talk about depreciation. Now that we have understood about componentization, depreciation is very simple under AS 10. Now it is based on the real useful life of the asset. And depreciation is calculated after deducting a residual value from the asset, and the balance is charged to P&L every year after year. So that is how we calculate depreciation for whenever there is property, plant and equipment. Now there is something with respect to changes in existing decommissioning, restoration and other liabilities. Whenever there is an asset being installed, that is whenever you buy a PPE, there could be some expenses to decommission and restore a new asset after the life of this PPE. That means I bought a windmill today. I bought a windmill today. This windmill is useful for say 20 years. After 20 years, I will have to dismantle this windmill from that place, for which I know that in future I will have a cost of say 2 lakh rupees. 2 lakh rupees is what I'm going to incur after 20 years. What standard says is these 2 lakhs are supposed to be added to your cost of the asset today itself. Any future recommissioning, decommissioning and restoration charges exist, I will have to add this to this asset today itself, and then recognize the asset at its fair value. That means this 2 lakhs is future value. So today's value for the 2 lakhs would be discounted at whatever be the market rate for that particular asset, and then accounted for accordingly. Okay. So predominantly these are few important aspects which are necessary. Apart from this, there is something called derecognition. What does derecognition mean? Derecognition means, when do we take off this asset from our books of accounts? Number one, when you sell it off, you derecognize the asset. Otherwise, if you feel there is no future economic benefit from the asset, in either of these cases, first one is sale or disposal, second, no future economic benefit. In either of these two cases, you derecognize the asset from your books of accounts. So with this, predominantly the standard is done. Fairly speaking, the same methodology exists under intangibles under Ind AS. That means under intangibles, now that we are at this plant and machinery, property, plant and machinery, let me go ahead to intangibles and finish that off. Intangibles under AS, you have two types of intangibles. One is self-generated, second is bought out. If it is self-generated, all expenses incurred till the time of research phase are charged to P&L, and development phase alone are accounted as your cost of intangible asset. If it is bought out, whatever price you have bought out, that is the price at which you recognize in your books of account initially for the intangible asset. Now, what is the life of these intangibles? Here, intangibles are broadly classified into two. Intangible assets are broadly classified into two. Number one, an intangible other than goodwill. Second is goodwill. Now, intangibles other than goodwill is further classified into two. Number one, for which life is definite. Second, where life is indefinite. Now, if it is a goodwill which is intangible, AS says AS 26 is not something which deals with goodwill accounting and goodwill, intangible asset which is a goodwill. Goodwill is purely accounted based on AS 14 but not AS 26. Okay. Now that means AS 26 deals only with intangibles which are other than goodwill. Now let us understand with accounting of other than goodwill. AS 26 says an asset which is intangible other than goodwill, if it has got a finite life, that is definite life, impair it or amortize it over the useful life. Over the useful life, it is supposed to be amortized. But when it comes to indefinite life, it states that AS 26 states that Such indefinite useful life assets are to be amortized over a reputable presumpted 10 years life. This is what AS 26 says. Okay. However, under Ind AS, none of these apply. Under Ind AS, none of these apply. Now, under Ind AS, for intangible assets, as I earlier mentioned, assets are classified into intangibles other than goodwill and goodwill. In this, there could be assets which have definite life and indefinite life. Goodwill is generally purchased goodwill because self-generated goodwill is not supposed to enter, prohibited. So it is basically purchased goodwill only. Now standard says this self-generated, purchased goodwill or indefinite life goodwill are tested for impairment on every balance sheet date. Every balance sheet date, and charged to P&L if there is impairment loss. When it comes to assets, intangible assets which have definite life, on these assets, you are supposed to write them off over useful life. Okay. This is with respect to amortization of intangible assets under Ind AS. The first slide is about amortization of intangibles under AS. This is under Ind AS. AS says goodwill is supposed to be amortized over 5 years as per AS 14. Intangible assets which have definite life are to be amortized over useful life. Intangibles which have got an indefinite life are supposed to be written off over 10 years, which is a reputable presumption under AS. When it comes to Ind AS, intangible assets which are goodwill or indefinite life intangibles, they are supposed to be written off over every year. There is a test for impairment on every balance sheet date, and then charged to P&L whatever impairment loss exists. But when it comes to definite life, it is amortized over the useful life, is what Ind AS says with respect to intangibles. Now, apart from this, there is one more difference between AS and Ind AS. Under AS, intangible assets are recognized only using cost model. However, under Ind AS, intangible assets can be recognized either using cost model or revaluation model. That means whatever you have under Ind AS 16, that is property, plant and equipment, where you have two categories of, I think it's in previous record, so I cannot retrieve it now. So whatever models you have under property, plant and equipment for subsequent measurement on balance sheet date, that is cost model and revaluation model, exist under intangible assets also under Ind AS, but the same do not exist under AS at all. Okay, so these are few differences between AS and Ind AS with respect to property, plant and equipment, and also goodwill, intangible assets. Let's go to AS 11. AS11, Ind AS 21. The major differences between AS and Ind AS are AS11 talks about accounting for foreign transactions. Number two, accounting for foreign branches or subsidiaries. That is, if you have a foreign entity, how such financial statements are to be converted. Third, accounting with respect to forex hedges, forex hedging. These are what predominantly covered, that is with respect to futures, forex futures. Okay, but when it comes to Ind AS 21, standard talks about the same transactions. One is for foreign transactions accounting. Second, how branches or subsidiaries financial statements are to be converted. And then with respect to foreign currency forward contracts, it draws its accounting from financial instrument standards, which talks about forward contracts and accounting. The same is brought into this standard also. Now that means accounting wise, there is no big difference between AS11 and Ind AS 21. However, there is only one difference. Under AS, you have two currencies called as domestic currency and foreign currency. What is domestic currency? The currency in which you are preparing your financials is domestic currency. Foreign currency is the currency into which you have traded or have a transaction in. But when it comes to Ind AS, you have three currencies. One, a functional currency. Second, a presentation currency. And third, another foreign currency could be there. Okay. Now, what is a functional currency? Functional currency is the currency in which your business generally is done. For example, take example of Murugappa Group here, Paris Sugars. Paris Sugars is based out of Chennai, but say it is a 100% export oriented unit. 100% export oriented unit, and all its produce is supplied only to Europe, and the currency in which it operates is euros. Euros is the currency in which it operates. Now, in India also it has its operations happening. However, for the sake of the presentation, because it has got many foreign stakeholders, it prepares its financial statements in USD. And say it imports its materials from say Brazil. Brazil is the place where it imports its raw material from. Hence, Brazil is the place where it transacts in foreign currency. Now, Paris Sugars is sitting in India. Paris Sugars is based out of India. It is importing materials from Brazil. It is completely operating in European market, and its financials are prepared in USD. In such case, how do I identify my currency is what important for me is. Now, the currency in which I prepare my financials is what I call as presentation currency. That is the currency in which I prepare my financial statements. So USD becomes my presentation currency. The currency in which I generally operate, that is, which will impact my operations of the business, is what I call as functional currency. For me, functional currency right now is European, whatever, pound or euro, whatever it be. Okay. And apart from these two currencies, any other currency is foreign currency for me. Now I am importing material from Brazil. For Brazil, maybe it is USD, which is in operation. USD will be my foreign currency. Okay. How I convert it into each of these is what really matters. Okay. So that only difference between AS and Ind AS is, under AS you have one domestic currency, that is presentation currency. Second, any other currency is foreign currency. But when it comes to Ind AS, you have something called functional currency, in which your economic activities take place. Second, presentation currency, the currency in which you prepare your financial statements. Any other currency is called as foreign currency. Okay. So these are the major differences between AS and Ind AS with respect to foreign exchange. Okay. Now let's move to government grants. AS 12, Ind AS 20. AS 12, the scope, if you see, it specifically states that government means it could be either central government, state government, or local body. Government grant means whatever is given as a revenue grant or a non-revenue grant, but it specifically excludes government assistances. It specifically excludes government assistances. However, when it comes to Ind AS, Ind AS 20 specifically includes government assistances also as part of government grants. Assistance is also considered as government grants, and it is included as part of your the standard. Okay, this first important difference what you have. Secondly, government grants are broadly classified into two. I'm first telling about AS. One is revenue grant, second is non-revenue grant. Any revenue grant is supposed to be taken to P&L immediately. Non-revenue grants can be further classified into two. One, a capital contribution. Second, towards purchase of asset, or an asset itself may be contributed. When it comes to capital contribution, it is shown as part of your reserves, shown as part of your equity in the balance sheet. When it comes to asset which is provided as a government grant, in such case, you have two options. Number one, the government may give you the asset directly, or it may fund the asset. If it gives you the asset directly, you would recognize it in your books of accounts at a nominal value. A nominal value is allotted to it and then taken it into your books of accounts. That is what we do if asset itself is given by the government, and I am supposed to disclose that in my books of accounts. In such case, say 1 rupee will be the value which I will disclose at my books of accounts. Now, If it is funded, say if it is funded to the extent of money is received from government, that would be deducted from the asset value for which I have purchased. Say I have purchased a lakh of rupees of asset on which 60,000 is given by government. I would disclose only 40,000 in my books of accounts. This is one type of accounting which is allowed. Second category of accounting which is allowed is second category. This is first category. I'm putting hash mark. Second category, star mark. Second category which is allowed is in my balance sheet, I would recognize 1 lakh as the asset value, and the 60,000 whatever I've received is considered as a loan which I've received from government. And as I depreciate this 1 lakh to my P&L, as I depreciate this to my P&L, I would recognize income for this 60,000 into my P&L. These are various methods what you have in accounting for government grants under AS. Now let me talk about Ind AS. Under Ind AS, I will mark. I will tell you how it is different from AS and Ind AS here itself. Revenue grants are supposed to be taken to P&L immediately. The same exists under Ind AS also. When it comes to capital contribution, this cannot be taken as part of equity under Ind AS. It is shown as a assistance which is given, and you are supposed to see a real life utility. That is, for how many years this capital contribution can be utilized by the entity and recognize as income. Recognize as income over the real useful life. Real useful life. That is with respect to capital contributions. When it comes to assets, assistance is to be made. Assistance is to be made if it is a direct purchase of asset by the government and given to you. Nominal values are not at all allowed under Ind AS. You are supposed to recognize a fair value of the asset. That is the price at which I would have bought that asset. Fair value of the asset only should be recognized, and the to the extent of value which you are recognizing it as an asset, the same value should be recognized as a liability. And as we depreciate the asset, this amount should be recognized as income in the P&L. That means a fair value of asset should be recognized, and also a fair value of liability should be recognized for the amount of assistance received from the government. And this liability is recognized as income in the books of accounts over the life of the asset. Okay. And when it comes to money which is received to purchase a asset, same rules what we have seen for asset which is given are applicable for money is received towards purchase of assets. That means out of these two options what you have, the first option does not exist at all. That means deducting the amount of assistance received from government is never allowed under Ind AS. You are only supposed to recognize the asset at fair value and recognize the amount of assistance received from government as a liability. And this amount of liability is to be recognized as income over the life of the asset, in your P&L, in line with depreciation what you charge on this 1 lakh. So these are the methods what you have under government grants accounting when it comes to Ind AS. I hope these are the, I hope you understood. These are the differences between AS and Ind AS with respect to government grants. Now, AS 13, fairly speaking, there is no corresponding standard under Ind AS at all. There is no corresponding standard under Ind AS at all. That's a standalone standard, which I believe you all know. Let's go to AS 14, 15 are done. 16 is another important standard. AS 16 and Ind AS is 23. A16 talks about capitalization of borrowing cost. And it specifically says in what context we are supposed to capitalize. It also defines what a borrowing cost is. Standard says borrowing cost means the cost of interest and finance charges what you pay over the period of the borrowing is what I call as borrowing cost. And any initial expenses incurred to attain that borrowing are not considered as borrowing cost is what standard says under A16. Any such initial expenses are charged to P&L in the year of borrowing. That is what A16 says. However, AS23 says borrowing cost means any cost incurred to attain a financial assistance to the entity. When I say any cost, it includes initial brokerage paid to agencies, or there could be amounts which are paid as processing fees, any other initial expenses like documentation expenses and all. Any such cost which you incur initially is considered as part of your borrowing cost, and hence these are not charged to P&L immediately. However, they are expensed off in the life of the borrowing. Now, the moment I say it is expensed off over the life of the borrowing, it means that it draws its initiative from financial instruments accounting while there is a borrowing. It draws its impact from financial instruments accounting when there is a borrowing. That means for a financial liability where the principal and interest components exist, we discussed long back 3-4 days ago that whenever there is a financial liability, accounting is done. If there is a principal and interest cost, effective interest rate is to be calculated for each of the borrowing, and then that rate is applied for our accounting is what we have discussed. The same effective interest rate is to be calculated whenever there is a borrowing. Okay, accounting is purely based on EIR, but not based on the initial expenses and subsequent interest to be recognized in P&L or capitalization and all. Okay, only effective interest rate is calculated. That amount of interest would be capitalized if the asset is a qualifying asset. Otherwise, it is not recognized as an asset and it is expensed off to P&L. So that is the base with respect to how you would recognize in your books of account a borrowing cost. Now, moving to second category in this same standard. What is a substantial asset? What is a qualifying asset? What is a qualifying asset? A qualifying asset is an asset which takes substantial period of time for the asset to be ready to use. Now, all these definitions and all which are part of your intermediate. Let me not discuss much about that. A qualifying asset, if it gets qualified, that is, if it takes substantial period of time, you are eligible to add the amount of borrowing cost to your qualifying asset. Otherwise not. The same principles exist in Ind AS also. Next. What borrowing cost can be capitalized. Standard says whenever there is a borrowing cost to be capitalized, if there is any borrowings made specifically, that is only for the qualifying asset, specifically for qualifying asset, those are supposed to be capitalized. Share of borrowings which are made in general, any general borrowings, and their monies which are utilized towards this borrowing, towards this qualifying asset, the share of borrowing cost which is specifically used for this asset also can be capitalized. This is what standard says with respect to borrowing cost. However, under Ind AS it says any borrowing cost which is specifically made for a qualifying asset, only those borrowing costs are supposed to be added to your qualifying asset. Any general borrowings which are used are not supposed to be added, Over and above that, if there are loans taken by holding company for its subsidiary's sake, that is subsidiary's qualifying asset, or there is a subsidiary which has taken loan for the sake of its holding company's qualifying asset, in either of these cases you can consider the borrowings made by the group. For this specific qualifying asset while calculating your weighted average cost of capital. Weighted average cost of capital can be calculated using the group's borrowings. However, any general borrowings made and monies utilized out of general borrowings towards this specific qualifying asset cannot be considered as borrowing cost for capitalization. So this is major difference between AS and Ind AS with respect to borrowing costs. Next, 17 is done. I already explained with respect to segment reporting. Let's now move ahead to 18. Related parties. You have AS 18 and Ind AS 24. Now, from AS or Ind AS perspective, for an entity, related parties can be identified in two ways. Number one, the entity's relation with other entities. Second, due to its key managerial personnel, KMPs. Now, relations with other entities, if you observe, if an entity has entered into a joint venture, any joint venture, so any other co-venturers may be called as related parties, or I have a subsidiary relationship or a holding relationship with other entity, then it is called as a related party. Or there could be associates in which I am interested in those entities also I am said to be related party. Okay. When it comes to KMPs, where it is key, key managerial personnel and their close family members are considered as related parties. Now, whom do I call closely related family members? First of all, KMPs means those members in the entity who take critical decisions with respect to their function. Now, what does that mean? All these C-based designations in the company. What does C-based designation mean? Chief uh, executive officer, chief financial officer, chief operating officer, and then chief operating decision makers. So like this, you have multiple C-based designations in the company. All these are considered to be key managerial personnel, and then you have directors who are key managerial personnel, in which you have two categories: one, whole-time directors, and you know uh, other directors. Irrespective of whether he is a whole-time director or other director, he is said to be a KMP only. And then you might have directors based on execution. So you have executive directors and non-executive directors. All these are part of your KMPs only. All are important personnel. Now, what AS 18 says is, if either of these members are identified as KMPs in the company, their family is also said to be related parties. That means, what do we mean by close family? That particular KMP, his father, his mother, KMP's spouse, and then KMP's son, daughter, and their spouses, and KMP's siblings. Predominantly, this is only the chart. Okay, and of course, son's spouse or daughter's spouse. Don't go beyond that now. However, under Ind AS, it is completely different. Now, as you all know, Ind AS is something which is drawn out of foreign IFRS, where you have a concept called domestic partner. What do you call by domestic partner? Of course, there is no such so-called Sanatan Dharma and all under in foreign countries, where they have that option of and freedom to quickly call off a marriage and get married again, or maintain multiple relationships in various countries. So this concept of domestic partners has become prominent there. Hence, the same word is utilized here also. If a KMP has got a domestic partner, even such domestic partner is also considered as a related party under Ind AS. Okay, so apart from spouse, if there are any domestic partners, so they are also considered to be influential in the business of the entity. Okay, so this is broadly the difference between related parties. Okay, so 19 is already discussed. Let us move ahead to other standards. 20 is already done. 21 is done. 22 taxes is already done. 23 is done. 24. AS 24, Ind AS 5, Ind AS 105 in fact. The standard AS 24 talks about discontinuing operations whereas Ind AS 105 says it is discontinued operations. This is the standard name for AS 24. Ind AS, it is non-current assets held for sale and discontinued operations. Now, what is the difference here is, it is present continuous tense in AS 24 and it is past tense in Ind AS. Past tense in Ind AS. Why are these words so different? Is there any implication out of it? Of course, yes. I'll first tell you about AS 24, then we will talk about Ind AS. Now, AS 24, say, I'll give you an example. From 2015 to 2020, I have 5 lines of businesses, 5 lines of operations. In 2015, I have presented to the board, I being one of the board member, I have presented to the board stating that operation, operation segment, segment A is not in a good performing condition, and hence it is better to discontinue, is what the request what I have made to the board, and board has thought of it but has not passed on any information about when it has to take actions against it. In 2016, by the end of 2016, board has come up stating that analyze the pros and cons, analyze the pros and cons, analyze pros and cons. What if we discontinue the business and what if we continue with the business? Such pros and cons are expected to be analyzed. And by 2017, we have identified that it is good to discontinue. It is good to discontinue. That is, board meeting has decided that to discontinue. However, a formal plan is not yet out. A formal plan is not yet out. Only a board decision has been taken. By 2018, a formal plan of discontinuance is disclosed, and they have stated to the employees also that maybe in another 6 months or 1 year, your jobs are gone. So you better search now itself if you find any, and quit the company in next 2-3 months, is what the company has announced. And the moment they announce about discontinuing, they might not find a prospective buyer for that business. It might take some lot of time for them to identify buyers for their assets, sell each of their assets, settle all their liabilities. So there is a continuous process. Now, it took 2019 and 2020, 2 years for them to completely stop the entire operations. Okay. 1 second, guys. There is an office call. Yeah. Sorry, guys. So I took 2 years to complete my sale of all the assets and settle all the liabilities and close that particular operations. Now, AS 24 says it should recognize this particular segment as a discontinuing operation from the time a formal plan is evolved out. That is, from the time board decides. That is, in 2017, when we actually decided to discontinue the operation, from then till 2020, these operations are to be separately disclosed in the financials, is what AS 24 says. Okay. Now that means over 2017 to 2020, say it is 3 years. Over 3 years in the financials, I would be recognizing my assets and liabilities at realizable values. Any income from discontinued operation is to be shown separately, as a separate line item in your P&L. Expenses incurred towards your discontinuing operations should be disclosed separately. Profit or loss made on discontinuing operations to be disclosed separately. Everything independently you are supposed to show with respect to discontinued operations. Now, this is what AS 24 says. Now let us come to Ind AS 105. Ind AS 105 says the moment the board has taken a decision to not continue with the business, why call it a discontinuing operation? It is already decided to discontinue, hence it is a discontinued operation. You are only holding those assets and liabilities because you are trying to find a sell buyer, that's all. There is no point in calling it a discontinuing operation. Instead, call it a discontinued operation is what Ind AS says. So Ind AS 105 says such operations are to be considered as discontinued operations, and apart from that, it has theoretically extended this standard also to non-current assets held for sale. That means there could be few assets in the balance sheet which exist, but might not be having any value in use. Any such assets are supposed to be recognized as non-current assets held for sale, or such assets will not be disclosed at cost or revaluation model. Such assets will be recognized only at recoverable amount, that is realizable values only will be recognized. It will be recognized only at realizable values in the balance sheet. Now, the moment it is identified as discontinuing operation under AS 24, or it is discontinued operation under Ind AS, what are the financial impacts? Number one, assets are shown at realizable values. That means if I sell it, what is the price I get? Never show those values at usable values. That is, value in use is no more relevant. You have decided to sell it off. Don't talk about usage value now. Okay. Realizable values are to be recognized in your books of accounts for assets. Number two, for liabilities, you are supposed to show settlement values. At what values you are planning to settle them, or it is agreeable with the other creditor or vendor, at what rate they will be willing to accept a settlement. Third, when it comes to income, recognize income in your P&L separately. P&L separate line item. Number four, expenses, separate line item for all expenses together of this particular discontinued operations. Result, that is profit or loss, to be disclosed separately. And in your notes to accounts, that is your post balance sheet P&L, notes to accounts, give the stage of discontinuance. What does stage of discontinuance mean? It is basically giving an information stating that I may have to wait for 1 more year to completely sell off all these assets and then pay off my liabilities, or some other mode can be explained in stating that I would take 2 years to sell off all these assets and liabilities, and only then my balance sheet would be without any discontinued operation. So such details should be given if at all there is any remarks with respect to discontinued operations. So this is broadly what we have in AS 24 and Ind AS 105. So what else do we have? AS25 did we do or not? Okay, interim financial reporting. Yeah, we finished that off. So let me not do that again. So AS26, I've just discussed about intangibles. That's done. 27 is also done. And then 28 you don't have. 29, let me do that. AS29, comparative is Ind AS 37. AS29 talks about provisions, contingent liabilities, and contingent assets. Same with Ind AS 37 also. Now, what is a provision? What is a contingent liability? What is a contingent asset? A provision is basically something which is created due to your past interaction and a present condition. That is, you have a past experience with the transaction, which is forcing you to have a present liability. So in such cases, you call it a provision in your balance sheet. AS29 says provisions are all generally current liabilities. Provisions are all current liabilities is what AS29 says. Reason is there is a present obligation. There is a present obligation out of a past event. That means if there is a past event due to which you have a present obligation and you expect there is a outflow of enterprise resources which can be reliably estimated. Outflow, and that outflow can be reliably estimated. Then you call it a provision. Now, if there is a provision identified, that is, if there is a future expense possible, if there is a probable outflow, in such case, what we stated is a provision, and for any provision under AS, it is supposed to be recognized as a liability in the books of account, and these liabilities are shown at the same values, and no time value of money is accounted for. No time value of money is accounted for. Okay, this is what AS29 says. Now, from the context of contingent liability, this also has got same conditions. That is, there is a present obligation. And I do not know the amount of outflow. That is, outflow cannot be estimated. Outflow cannot be estimated. In such case, I call it a contingent liability. I call it a contingent liability. or there is a possible, possible obligation, and possible indicates that could happen, and I know the outflow can be estimated. In either of these two circumstances, I call it a contingent liability. Any contingent liability under AS is required to be disclosed in the financial statements, notes to accounts. There is no requirement of accounting it at all. When it comes to contingent asset, any such contingent assets from where in future I might receive something, or I'm not sure about whether I would win something or not, but I'm sure that if at all I win something, I get a specific amount. In such case, I call it a contingent asset. Any contingent asset is not even disclosed in the balance sheet under AS. Now, let us go to Ind AS. Ind AS says a provision need not always be a current liability. There could be long-term provisions also. If it is estimated that in future I am going to incur an expense, or a loss, and it is understood that the period for which I might take to incur such expense or loss is more than one operating cycle, even then standard asks you to provide for provisioning. Provisioning is required even for non-current. That means there could be provisions which are long-term also under Ind AS. And any such long-term provisions, that is any provision, in fact, any provision, if it is expected to be incurred beyond an operating cycle, that is more than 12 months, the standard asks you to apply time value of money for provisioning also. Are to be applied for provisioning also. That means you are supposed to bring it to present value today, and every year you should apply that time value factor and increase that such that at the end of the period it becomes the actual cost what you are going to incur in future. Okay, so this is with respect to provision. Now, current liabilities, as it is supposed to be disclosed in the balance sheet, part of your other notes to accounts. Contingent liabilities and contingent assets. Contingent assets also, unlike AS, these are supposed to be disclosed in the financial statements along with contingent liabilities. It's not just contingent liabilities to be disclosed, even contingent assets are also required to be disclosed under Ind AS. So that is what the difference between AS and Ind AS with respect to provisions, contingent liabilities and contingent assets is. Okay. Now with this, let us go to the standard which we have left off, that is AS 7, AS 9 and Ind AS 115. Ind AS 115. Fairly speaking, comparative standards for AS 7 and AS 9 earlier were, till last year, you had Ind AS 11 and Ind AS 18 earlier. These two standards are called off now, and a new standard which takes care of any contract with customer, Ind AS 115 is brought into Ind AS. Fairly speaking, Ind AS 115 was a standard which was made available by 2015 by India. That is, while adopting Ind AS itself, we were ready with Ind AS 115. However, internationally, IFRS 15 is the standard which is comparable standard for 115. This standard was made available by all other international countries. However, many countries were not yet ready to take up this IFRS 15 implementation in their respective countries. Hence, they have deferred the standard applicability for 3 years. They have deferred the standard applicability for 3 years. Hence, from 2018 onwards, Ind AS 115 or else IFRS 15 has become globally applicable, and the same time even Ind AS 115 is also announced to be implemented. So in India, if you observe, 1st April 2018 onwards, Ind AS 115 is in application. Now, with this intro, let us go into what's there with AS and Ind AS. Now, AS7 or AS9, if you observe, in fact, AS9 is a dependent standard on AS9. How is it dependent? AS7 draws percentage of completion method and all from service contracts revenue recognition of AS9. Hence, AS7 and AS9 are dependent contracts. Sorry, AS7 is a dependent contract on AS9. Now, when it comes to Ind AS in comparison with AS7 and 9, I'll give you an example for which this standard has come into picture. The first requirement is say I am an entity operating in sale of cars. That is, I manufacture cars and sell. I draw a revenue of 10 lakhs on a sale of car. On this sale of car for 10 lakhs, I give my customer a car. I give him warranty for 2 years. I give him guarantee on the engine and few parts of the car for 10 years. Like this, there are some list of facilities which I give. Okay. And there are 2 or 4 free services, blah, 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 and all. There are multiple features which I provide. Now, how much should I recognize immediately out of this 10 lakhs is the biggest question. Out of this 10 lakhs is the biggest question. AS9 and AS7 are silent in this aspect. Though there are guidelines, guidance notes which have come with recognition of revenues with respect to warranties, guarantees, and sale with services contracts. It is not part of the standard. Hence, there is some difficulty which arose. Another example. I am a credit card dealer. That means my job is to provide facilities of credit card, make customers utilize my credit facility. If they don't pay, bang them with interest charges left and right. This is my business. Now, credit cards are my business. I offer to my credit card participants, for every 100 rupees spent, I give them 1 point, and each point is equal to 1 rupee. Each point is considered as 1 rupee, which will be allowed by them to use if they accumulate 1000 points in a year. Some condition I put on it. Okay. Now, which means I generally get a revenue. I generally get a revenue from these points. When should I recognize these points as revenue? When should I expense this off is what I should identify. Same way, say Reliance Digital. In fact, Reliance Any Mart, Reliance anything, you have this points concept in Reliance also. Reliance also. He says for every 1,000 points what you accumulate, you will be allowed to purchase for 250 rupees. Some X number is mentioned. Now, when you are asked to expense that 250, it means it's a revenue for the customer. Now, when did he earn this revenue of 250? He earned this revenue over a period of 1 year out of your spendings. That means you are supposed to define out of this monies collected during this 1 year. During this 1 year, how much should be recognized as immediate revenue? How much revenue should be deferred for future period? Okay. So these are various questions which got raised after the new ways of marketing and new ways of income generation got created. Okay. To answer all these questions, existing standards were not capable of answering them. That is the reason why we have come up with this standard called Ind AS 115, where the standard says accounting of any contract with customer is to be jotted down into a 5-step process. Is to be jotted down into a 5-step process, where the first step happens to be identification of contract. Now, why is this important? First of all, you need to understand whether there is a contract or not between the parties. Unless there is a contract, don't bring it into the standard at all. That means any transaction with the customer is basically a contract only. Any transaction with the customer is basically a contract only, and you should identify what are the terms of the contract when you say about a contract. Second, identify performance obligations. What are performance obligations? Performance obligations are basically nothing but what should customer do every year if at all I sell him a car. What should I do every year if at all I sell a car? So those are my performance obligations. That means in the first year I'll deliver car. In the second year I'll give him warranty. In the third year I'll give him XYZ. In fourth year I'll give him XYZ. In the 5th to 10th year, if there is any problem with the machine, I will take care of the losses completely. Like this, we will give multiple performance obligations. We will jot down all the performance obligations. Next, for each of these performance obligations which I have identified, I will have to determine a transaction price. Determine transaction price. Now, what is determination of transaction price here? Determination of transaction price is, if I provide the same service to some other fellow, what would be the price at which I sell? For example, I sold a car for 10 lakhs. Out of this, I am stating that for car sale, I have some warranty which I am giving. I have some other services which I am giving, and something else, guarantee is being given. Now, if I give warranty alone as a service to some other car, how much would I charge? For example, say it is 1 lakh. In such case, the transaction price for my car sale in this entire transaction of 10 lakhs is 1 lakh. Services, normally per service I charge 5,000 rupees. I am giving him 3 free services or 4 services in a year. That means 20,000 rupees is the service charge what I am supposed to recognize as revenue when I actually render services. Okay. Same way, guarantee. Over 10 years, I am giving him a guarantee. For 10 years, say the guarantee cost for me would be 2 lakh rupees. In such case, I will have to recognize 2 lakh rupees over a spread of 10 years. Okay. So that means initially my car has a transaction value of minus all these costs. So 3.2 is supposed to be deducted. That means 6.8 lakhs is only my car cost. If I sell car alone without any of these features, I should sell it for 6.8 lakhs. Because of all these features being bundled and sold, I'm supposed to identify individual transaction price for each of these identified obligations, performance obligations. That is third step. Okay. Next, allocation of transaction price. This is what I generally mean. So now these are individual transaction price. For example, excuse me. For example, I have made this as part of 10 lakhs. Mostly what happens is, because I'm bundling all this and giving you, I'm giving you at these rates. If I have to give it as an independent product for you, I would give it as 2 lakhs for warranty, 40,000 for service, 3 lakhs for guarantee, and car alone, if you ask me, I would sell it for at least 8 lakhs. Otherwise, I will not sell. These are the prices which I have fixed. In which case, I will have to identify the proportionate value out of this transaction price. I'll have to identify the proportionate value for this transaction price for each of these components of performances. So in such cases, there is something called allocation of transaction price. Okay. So the price at which I sell is basically the transaction price. Allocation of transaction price is based on the fair value of that particular product or service. Okay. So for car, now what will I do? 10 lakhs into 8 lakhs divided by total of all this. 8 lakhs, 10 lakhs, 13 lakh 40,000. That becomes my transaction price for allocated transaction price for car sale alone. 2 lakhs divided by 13 lakhs 40,000 into 10 lakhs becomes towards warranty. 40,000 divided by 13 lakh 40,000 into 10 lakhs becomes towards my service cost. And for guarantee, it is going to be 3 lakh divided by 13 lakh 40,000 into 10 lakhs. That becomes towards guarantee cost. Okay. Guarantee services what I'm rendering. This is how you are supposed to allocate all your transaction costs. Now, lastly, recognize revenue. I'm wiping this off for ease of writing. For ease of writing, let me wipe this off. Now, the last part what comes is revenue is recognized as and when performance obligation is serviced. Is satisfied. For example, I delivered car in the first year itself. Recognize that 8 lakhs. Recognize 8 lakhs. In the second year, I delivered services, free services. Recognize 40,000 or 20,000, whatever it be. 20,000, recognize it. In the third year, the buyer has come back to me and told that there is some warranty issue. The car is not properly working. There is some change in battery or something like that. The moment he tells that I'm supposed to repair that without any cost. So any cost incurred supposed to be charged to P&L that year, and revenue can be recognized in that financial year. Okay, because he has come back to you for that warranty to get attracted. Okay, so that is the year in which I would recognize towards warranty. Till the completion of 10 years, I am supposed to recognize guarantee every year on a proportionate basis. Okay, so this is how we do. If it is under Ind AS 115, these criteria do not exist under AS 7 or AS 9. Okay, so broadly, this is the difference between AS and Ind AS with respect to contract accounting for construction contracts, and also for sale and other services also. Okay. So with this, I think we are predominantly done. Okay. What is not covered for you, I'll quickly tell you. What is not covered for you is value added statement, economic value added, then HR accounting, and then you have mutual funds accounting, that is NAV calculation, and then you have NBFC's accounting, NBFC accounting. Predominantly, these are not done for you. However, these are very simple and easy topics which you can do by yourself, where you would not really need assistance or a round of revision. You can yourself prepare through your self-learning process. So these are points which we have not covered. Apart from that, within the standards, what we have done, what is not covered inside the standards is, as I earlier mentioned, in consolidation, I have not covered only your P&L. Consolidated P&L is not covered. And then when there is a foreign subsidiary, integrated and non-integrated, these two are not covered by me. So broadly, these are what you should prepare. These are what you should prepare for yourself. Now, there are few students who have asked for how to prepare for exam. I'll just quickly tell you that.